Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and a warm welcome from the Industry 4.0 Maturity Center. My name is Leanne Ta, and I'm delighted to guide you throughout today's webcast session, Lead in Digital Transformation Initiatives Out of the Crisis. But before we start, let me first give you some short information in order to ensure your best webcast experience. For replay purposes, this 45 minutes webcast will be recorded and published afterwards. Furthermore, we invite you to join a conversation with us and submit questions via the Q&A panel in this software. The questions will be then collected and consolidated, and at the end of the session, these questions will be answered. For those whose questions we can't answer at the end of the sessions, we will contact you individually afterwards. So please kindly leave your name with the corresponding questions so we can reach out to you later. Now, without further ado, I would like to hand over to Dr. Tobias Harland. Tobias is a senior manager at the Industry 4.0 Maturity Center here in Aachen, Germany. He has substantial expertise in the transformation journey of manufacturing companies. In particular, Tobias performs projects for customers in the automotive as well as discrete manufacturing industry together with his team. And we are very excited to hear what he has to say about how to lead digital transformation initiatives out of the crisis.
Thanks a lot, Leanne, for your kind introduction, and welcome everyone to this webcast. The manufacturing industry is far more agile than many of us thought. For example, ZF Friedrichshafen, usually an automotive supplier, produces face masks. Volkswagen suddenly is able to not only assemble cars, but also produces ventilators. And Jägermeister, from one day to the other, does not only bottle its famous liquor, but also bottles disinfectants. We see the benefits of digitalization becomes evident. If we would make a poll among all the participants of this webcast, I'm pretty sure that 80% and even more are following this webcast from their home offices. Large parts of the so-called knowledge workers work from home in these days. And the home office, which was a heatedly discussed topic just a few weeks ago between management and employees, today keeps many companies up and running. I guess many of us have a huge amount of video calls in these days. We, for example, use Microsoft Teams. Many use the tool Zoom. And just to bring some numbers to the table, here is the stock price of the company Zoom Technologies. And as you see, it increased by 750% by beginning of March. And what happened then? The market realizes that Zoom Technologies is not Zoom video conferences, so they picked the wrong stock. But even if we take a look at the real Zoom stock prices, we see an increase of 137%. And that shows how important tools like Zoom suddenly became. Besides video conferences, we see that the so-called SMAC technologies, SMAC means social, mobile, analytics, and cloud, they unfold their full potential today also in our business lives after they already have unfolded their potential in our private lives already many years ago. Today we see the benefits of collaborating in the cloud, for example with Microsoft 365, or we cultivate our business network on LinkedIn and not on physical meetings and trade fairs. The so-called Enterprise 2.0 becomes reality, at least for all white-collar workers in our companies. But what happens to the shop floors? We are in touch with many manufacturing companies who are developing and executing their digital transformation strategies with us. And just a few weeks ago, we saw a huge momentum in their initiatives. And with the start of the crisis and the beginning shutdown of the companies, this momentum came to an abrupt end. many initiatives were paused, of course, due to understandable reasons. The companies want to secure their liquidity, of course. And the so-called SMAC technologies, social, mobile, analytics, and cloud, they haven't reached our shop floors so far. In contrast to the white-collar workers, the people on the front line do not have any access to digital data. They don't dial into video calls. There are no real-time data from the machines collected in the cloud. We don't see any mobile applications on the shop floor. We do not learn from our operational data. But in fact, this is the vision of the Industry 4.0. So after recognizing that the huge benefit of the digital technologies among our white-collar workers in the companies, and also after putting many of the digitalization initiatives for our shop floors on hold in these days, right now is the time to take a deep breath and answer the following 4 questions. So the first question is, where can your digitalization budget be saved in the short term? The second question is, which digitalization activities can help to overcome the crisis? The third question is, how to use your idle capacities in your workforce today to support the digital transformation in future? And last but not least, how can digitalization help to become more resilient in future? And as you see, by following those 4 questions, we come from a reactive position where we just try to solve the most urgent issues to a proactive position. So let's start with the first question. How to save budget in the short term? Our experience from the past years is that many companies spent huge budgets on digitalization projects that were doomed to fail right from the beginning. The projects were driven in many cases by popular buzzwords. They were driven by the pressure of the top management to have Industry 4.0 solutions in the factories. And in some cases, they are also driven just by ideas of single employees who want to implement their ideas. And in our factory assessments, we see in nearly each factory one of the depicted prototypes. So predictive maintenance on one single machine, measuring one single value, like for example the vibration of a bearing. The system is not connected to the maintenance planning, and the rest of the machines, of course, is not equipped with such a monitoring system. This use case does not change anything. Another typical example are the AGVs, the autonomous guided vehicles, and they are seen as the incarnation of Industry 4.0 to have such a solution in your factory. And so they are purchased by the companies, they buy them, and afterwards they realize that they don't even have an IT system that is able to trigger the material transports. And lastly, a big data project that failed due to poor data quality is another typical use case that we see in many companies. What these examples all have in common, they are good to learn and to try out things, but they cannot be the basis for a comprehensive Industry 4.0 strategy. Their problem is that they are all isolated, and that fundamentally contradicts to the key idea of Industry 4.0, which is the integration. To make this point clear, we don't want to say that the presented technologies are useless. Our point is that the technology needs to fit to the current status quo of a company. The examples show that they will not unfold their full potential if they are considered as an isolated project only. They depend on a variety of elements that need to be in place before. The maturity level thus defines which technology should be implemented right now and which one would overstrain the organization at the moment. And here one of our tools can certainly help. It is the Acatech Industry 4.0 Maturity Index. And you can see it depicted on this slide. It has 6 stages. We say that Industry 4.0 starts at stage number 3, visibility. Having real-time data available on everything, on all the important events in your processes, in your company, and integrating them in an aggregated database. We added the first 2 stages because many companies do not start from here. They have homework to do from the past. So we added at the beginning the stage computerization. That means having digital data and IT systems at all. The second stage is called connectivity. That means connecting the single siloed IT systems and establishing a connection to the shop floor level, to the machines. About the stage 2, 3, we already talked. And after the stage 3, having real-time data available, after that stage, the stage transparency can follow. That means working with analytics, seeing cause and effect in data and having a model, a database model of what is going on in the processes. And if we once have this model, we can predict the future and go to stage number 5, predictability. That means to work with scenarios for the future and select the best one for the individual case. And if we once can build such scenarios, evaluate the scenarios, we can maybe in future let the system decide and go to stage number 6, adaptability. So where are the companies typically in this maturity stages? We conducted in the past years more than 70 detailed maturity studies with manufacturing companies, and we see that 80% of the studied companies have already taken their first steps to connecting their machines, systems and their people. That's quite a good progress, but there's still a long way to go. None of the companies have attained the maturity stage 4, transparency on a global level. A small proportion of companies, around 16%, is still starting out on their journey and have yet to move beyond stage number 1, the stage computerization, working with digital data. And today, just 4% of the companies have attained an average maturity score of visibility. That means working with real-time data, integrating real-time data. And this analysis shows that it is too early to run projects that we just saw some slides before. They just don't fit to the current maturity level and they will not unfold their potential. And from our perspective, now is not the time to spend budgets on projects for maturity stages 4, 5 or 6. Now it is about to fix the basics. And this way of thinking in maturity levels helps us to prioritize the current projects in our digitalization project portfolio. Especially in these days where each euro, each dollar counts, so the highest priority should be on those projects that help us to fix the basics. And the good news about this project is we don't need to spend a lot external budget for them. We don't need to invest in technology. We can do many things with internal competences that are available in a company. Typical examples are master data management, master data cleansing, document management, the standardization of documentation, the generations of contents, standardized work instructions, for example, or the integration and retrofitting of existing machines and their PLCs. These projects are essential basics. The second priority should be on projects related to productive Industry 4.0 solutions. In contrast to the presented examples, like the predictive maintenance case, these projects, these solutions are able to provide a benefit to the company's bottom line immediately. So, for example, if your company started with the implementation of an industrial IoT platform in the last months, this kind of project shouldn't be stopped when all the basics are there. Maybe the focus has to be has to be adjusted a little bit, and those functionalities, those modules need to be focused that really have the highest impact right now on the urgent topics of industry of COVID-19. The third type of projects are exactly those projects we just saw some slides ago. So prototypes and proofs of concept that will not generate any impact on the bottom line in the short term and in the midterm, as many companies are in a crisis mode right now. It is just not the right time for long-term projects where the result is unclear. So let's move forward to the second question. How to overcome the crisis by using digital technologies? In the first question, we discussed existing digital projects, the portfolio of projects, just as normal projects that would be necessary anyhow. But in fact, the implications COVID-19 has on the new normal in our business lives is, from our perspective, a perfect match with the benefits the digital technologies hold. So, how can we create this new normal with digital technologies? On this slide, we see a very pragmatic example of an augmented reality solution that helps to connect the frontline workers with the digital world. Augmented reality means that I'm using an image, a video of the real world and add digital information to it. And this use case is coming from PTC. It's a very simple solution, simple to use solution that helps to establish a video connection, for example, between an operator of a machine and a maintenance engineer. And with simple drawings on the screen, the problems can be highlighted and also the instructions can be clarified, so the solution doesn't even require any digital data. So where do we find further fields of applications for digital technology that help us to overcome the most urgent issues that we have, that we suffer from right now? First and foremost, it is important to have access to the relevant operational data. At the beginning, we talked about the home office, the access to documents, spreadsheets, presentations, via, for example, the SharePoint or a VPN tunnel. This is normal for us. But what about the current operations of a plant? Every employee that helps to get the operations running, like the planners, the shift leaders, the maintenance engineers, quality engineers, and so on and so forth. They need to have remote access to the operational data of the plant. This operational data can be the current performance level of each line and each machine, or breakdown notifications and failure messages from the machines, hourly count boards from the lines, quality data, the real-time status of an order. It needs to be possible to jump into a video call with each operator for them. This kind of real-time data access would already dramatically increase the agility of a company under normal conditions. In times of COVID-19, it's almost mandatory to ensure the business continuity and at the same time minimize the social contacts between the employees. The second lever is about increased transparency of the entire production network. Huge supply chain risks become visible in these days. When the own factories in lockdown regions or suppliers from those regions can't deliver their products anymore, and digital technologies like a globally integrated, harmonized ERP and supply chain management, of course, can generate this transparency. We can also gather real-time operational data from each plant in our production network to generate a real-time view on the health of our entire production network. And the current crisis also shows us the limitations of traditional sales channels. Stores are closed, sales representatives cannot travel to their customers anymore, and trade fairs like the Hannover Messe are cancelled. So how to sell your products and services to your customers? Many companies, of course, present and sell their products, at least spare parts or consumables for their products, on their websites via web shops. And some companies, like we know it from the automotive OEMs, even offer digital product configurators on their websites to support the sales activities. But in future, companies need to go much further. There need to be digital touchpoints for the customers along the entire product lifecycle. For example, as user apps, software that comes with the product, or with integrated customer portals. They provide the product information and the documentation, the latest version of them, media assets like videos for the product. They enable the connection to the right sales representative or to the right maintenance engineer, and some of the services will surely be delivered completely digital. Last but not least, the technologies can help to repurpose production processes. When we take the examples of the beginning, mask production or ventilator production in an automotive factory, it is obvious that digitalization is only one part of the solution. When you change your production that heavily, you need to do also further things. But where can digitalization help? What's the role of digitalization in repurposing? One of the strengths of Industry 4.0 is the idea of always having the right information on hand when it is required. Due to the digitalization and the digital management of, and also the digital provisioning of information and documents, such as the work orders, routings, work instructions, change processes in our production become much more efficient, and production becomes thus much more flexible. And at the end, this is a long list of things companies could do. We again need to prioritize, and we would suggest the depicted portfolio to do so. So in the one dimension, we measure the expected effect of the measure, and in the other dimension we see the effort. And for example, on the top right, we see the digital shop floor management. It is a measure without where no external budget is needed, but that has a direct effect. So let's move forward. On this chart shows right now we have more than 10 million people, at least partly on short time, in Germany. This is a situation we haven't seen in the last 30 years. So what to do with all the idle capacity? I think the good news is that there are many things to do to support our digitalization journey that are not only related to technology and related to buy new things, invest money. Some of you might know the framework of the Industry 4.0 Maturity Index. We already introduced the maturity stages. It also contains, of course, it contains technological aspects. You can see them in the top half where we see information systems, our IT software, and resources like our machines. But in the lower part, we see also the organizational structure and the culture. And the idea is that the entire development of the digital maturity needs to take place in all the four fields of this model. And thus, even without budget for external investments, a lot of things can be improved in the digital maturity. We talked already about one example at the beginning, and many things that were in the category fix the basics actually belong to organizational aspects and cultural aspects. As a reminder, we talked about master data management, we talked about the generation of contents for our IT systems, we talked about standardization. All this is necessary that the technology can unfold its potential and where the time now can be used. Another initiative that does not require large budgets to be invested is to restructure your internal organization, the way of how you manage your digital transformation, and roll it out to your plants. From our experience, there are different jobs to do to make your digitalization strategy effective, especially when we talk about larger organizations. There are some activities where the corporate level needs to take care of to ensure global alignment, global standardization across the production network, for example. And examples are, for example, to set a standard framework for the IT architecture and the cloud architecture, standards for machine connectivity, standards for security, and also the selection of strategic partners so that not every plant selects their own IT systems and partners. There needs to be a central digitalization team that reports directly to the board, and that does not take a look at these issues only from an IT perspective, but that comes from the business. On the level of a business unit, a company needs to have some kind of digitalization consultants. They are necessary to make all the ideas from the management, from the top level, effective in the plants. They are in a constant dialogue with the plant managers and local responsibilities. They collect the requirements from plants and they explain and implement the standard solutions that are defined from corporate. So that not every plant manager does the work again and again. And all this work that is necessary to establish such an organization, to define the standards, to define the way of working, to get the people on board from your organization, that's something that can be done right now. And in the past years, many companies said they were lacking time, and they didn't do that due to that. And from our perspective, now is the time to clean everything up and set up a clear structure for how you want to manage the digital transformation. So let's move forward. A recent study of the German Chamber of Commerce with more than 15,000 participants shows that many manufacturers suffer heavily from the disruptions of the current crisis. So more than 60% of the participants indicate that there is less demand for their products. More than 40% have already liquidity bottlenecks. And on the other side, only 2% of the companies do not feel any impact to their business. So our fourth and last question is about how to become more resilient in the future. We already identified 4 levers where digital technologies can help to tackle the most urgent needs when we discussed our question number 2. But what about larger changes to the company and to its entire business model? First, from our perspective, our view on IT architecture has to change dramatically. The monolithic systems of the past, they are designed for efficiency. They are designed for a static way of doing your business. Today, there is a need for a much more flexible structure. The framework of the so-called Internet of Production, which is developed here in Aachen, shows a blueprint for such a flexible structure of your IT landscape. So, on the lowest level, on the bottom level, I think the good news is we should maintain the expert systems, the applications that we use today. On the lowest level, you can find on the left side in the development cycle the software that supports our engineering, like the CAD systems, PLM systems, simulation tools. In the middle, we see those systems that support our operations, like ERP, supply chain management, manufacturing execution systems. And on the right side, we see those systems that help us to get in touch with the customer, to sell our products. Also in future, these systems are required. And from our perspective, it is not the solution to, or the right way to throw everything away and buy everything new. From our perspective, if there is a running system on that level, we should further use it, but build something on top. In this green layer, we see a cloud-based infrastructure that has access to all the data sources on the bottom level, and that is able to manage data along the entire product life cycle in an integrated data model. And on this level, there need to be standards in place, standards especially for how to organize the data, and this gives us also the environment to flexibly develop apps using the unified structure of data. So for each use case, for each problem, we will have in future a dedicated app that can very flexibly be implemented, further developed, changed, and rolled out to the entire company. And it is always dedicated to a particular use case, to a particular problem. And in future, we think that with such an architecture, everyone will have the right information on hand that he or she needs in real time. Another lever is to reevaluate the business case of outsourcing and offshoring of activities. So, as we see in a recent study of the World Economic Forum, many manufacturers suffer from heavy disruptions on their demand side, but also on their supply side. And of course, a lot has to do with the supply chains that we run today. And from our perspective, this supply chains and the entire business case of outsourcing needs to be re-evaluated. And we are sure that there will be a massive trend of backshoring of production to even high-wage countries like Germany. But the increased risk in the supply chain is only one element of the new business case for the backshoring of production. For the other element, digitalization and Industry 4.0 come into play. Since 2011, when the idea of Industry 4.0 was made public, a huge impact on manufacturing was predicted. Today, we see this impact becoming reality. On this slide, we see a recent study of McKinsey that focused on KPI improvements of Industry 4.0 lighthouse factories across the entire globe. This study impressively shows what is possible. Even though there is a huge spread in the results, for us the message is clear. Industry 4.0 technologies have a large impact on the profitability of a manufacturer, and this makes it necessary to reassess also our production network. And the question is, if a modern Industry 4.0 plant in Germany can compete with a normal plant in a best cost country. Another big step to become more resilient in future regards the business model of a company. We saw some major changes in the modern management of a company, moving from a focus only on operational efficiency in the past decades to a focus on knowledge about our customers and the relationship to our customers. Starting with a product-centric business model, the trends step by step moved to a more to customer centricity. Today, many manufacturers are aware of the huge potential of a service business in addition to their product sales, and they already today generate huge revenues with their technical services. But during the last few years, some digital frontrunners taught us what customer centricity really means. So companies like Amazon, Netflix, Google, they are collecting data on every single customer, and they understand the needs of every single customer and offer tailor-made services to each single customers. And this idea of a subscription business model, of course, is also adapted at least step by step by some manufacturers. And these companies demonstrate the benefits of this so-called subscription business model. Companies have an ongoing relation with their customers, and they do not only generate a recurring revenue stream, they also continuously can learn from their customers, and they can continuously improve their products and services, and thus can continuously also adapt to changing needs in the market. After all, from our perspective, it is necessary now to answer those 4 questions we just went through and map all your digitalization initiatives and reprioritize them right now. This should give clarity on which business goals your company is aiming at, and it also clearly prioritizes the activities. I hope that during this webcast I could demonstrate that COVID-19 forces us to reprioritize our digitalization activities and to focus on realistic projects with a short-term impact as a first step right now. But also after we have covered the most urgent issues in our operations and we have ensured business continuity, we need to use digitalization to further develop our entire business model towards a truly digital business model that makes us much more resilient in future. So, thank you so far for your attention, and I think now it's time for the Q&A session.
Yes, thank you, Tobias, for your enriching presentation. And as you said, we are moving to discuss questions stated by the audience now. And we have indeed received a lot of questions submitted by our dear participants, so thank you for that. So yes, one question was that you said in the how to save budget in the short term part that you propose to stop projects that do not have a direct impact. Do you really think it's a good idea to stop innovation right now?
Yeah, thanks for the very good question. I think we assess the situation, the current situation, as follows. Many companies are in a very difficult situation, difficult financial situation right now. And from one day to the other, the production was stopped and sales dropped, and now liquidity first of all has to be ensured. And in such a tense situation, from our perspective, it is necessary in the first step to prioritize very hard and to stop all those projects that were launched without a clear contribution to the business. On the other hand, as a next step, it is also very important it's more important than ever to start innovative projects. We saw some examples where whole factories were repurposed to current needs of the market, and innovation is needed more than ever today, of course. And that was what we want to make clear with our second question. So how to use the existing digital technologies to tackle the most urgent issues of COVID-19. And from our perspective, we saw some examples like using augmented reality technologies to support business continuity and to avoid personal contact. Or there are other further examples like tracking the people in the plant to avoid that or to ensure that they keep their distance. And innovation is necessary, and we need to refocus the innovation on the most urgent problems right now and stop those projects that do not really help us in these days.
Yes, thank you very much, Tobias. I hope this answer answers your question, and we move on to question number 2. You mentioned the repurposing of production as one lever to use digital technologies to overcome the crisis. Is it really something where digitization can make an impact?
I would say that's another good question, because this repurposing, I would say, is on everyone's lips these days. So, and we also all know these examples. I showed 2 of them or 3 of them at the beginning of this session, and we are all surprised how quickly companies have reacted and switched, for example, to the production to protective equipment, for example. In such examples where you go from a production of parts for the automotive industry to protective equipment, I would say digitalization is not the most important thing to take care of. There are other things that are more important, like where do I get the raw material for that, how to train the people, or where to get the production equipment to go to such a production. However, what I would say is, the repurposing of production to protective equipment, which we see everywhere right now, is right now extremely helpful, but it will not save entire industries. There will be enough masks at some point, and in that phase, I would say it will be very important to become more flexible in your production. And that would, for example, means if there is the supply of a certain raw material is not there, we can flexibly switch to another product, or the demand of a particular product is low and we can switch to a product where the demand is a little bit higher within certain limitations. And that's where digitalization can really help a lot. Because as mentioned, digitalization, or one important idea of Industry 4.0 is to make information available whenever it is needed, without any lost time in between. And what we see is that, for example, when we provide the operators or people who are assembling products with digital information, or when we send digital programs, parameters to our production equipment, and we close all these gaps, we can be much faster with change processes, And this makes our factories much more flexible and helps us to react to changes in the environment much better. So that would be my answer to that.
Yes, thank you. And another question. When you talked about the idle capacities, you presented a concept for an organization that drives the digital transformation of a company. Many participants wonder if that is really necessary, and so what would you tell them?
Yeah, of course, that is something where, as a first step, it does not really. It seemed to not to help immediately, but our experience is it does, because we saw in the last years that so much money was wasted because there was on a top level there was the decision to or there was a digitalization strategy defined, and there was then a gap between the top management and the plants, the single factories of a company. And this strategy does not did not really become effective in the plants. It was at the end the situation was that each plant manager on all the employees within the plants, they saw that there was a huge pressure to do something, and they reinvented the wheel again and again, and they spent many effort in on single use cases without a really clear concept how to systematically transform their factory. And our experience is that those companies who structured the process, or who filled this gap between the top management decision to make use of digital technologies and the single plants, there's something necessary, you need something, and those companies perform much better when they have those central experts, digital consultants, or however you call them, who are able to, first of all, collect requirements from plants, consolidate requirements, help to define standards, and also to implement standards, because at the end we see many technologies, many expertise that is needed, and no single plant will ever have this expertise on site. And thus, from our perspective, it helps a lot to build this kind of organization. And of course, the extent and the size of this kind of organization and standardization depends, of course, on the size of the company. So we do not need 20 employees in such an organization if we only have 3 plants. In such a situation, it might be enough if there are 1 or 2 persons really taking care of this topic. But in any case, there need to be someone doing this job.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, we have another question. Could you recommend tools to assess or simulate the savings after implementing an Industry 4.0 solution as a help to decide whether to go or not with the solution?
Yeah, I think that's also a good question, because our experience from this from the past is when we followed our structured approach of assessing a company and the status quo, it's easy to find potential gaps where you could do something. So the amount of project that could be started is huge, and it's like in many cases about prioritization, and of course prioritization according to the business needs and to where the company earns its money. And in our experience, this is the most important thing to take care of, to measure the financial impact. And during the last years, we made some experience with that. We typically do 2 things. As a first step, we measure based on the current profit and loss statement and on benchmarking data that we have on other companies, very roughly what the potential return on invest could be. This is something that is done top down, so to say, And after we have derived such a roadmap, we come with a bottom-up calculation, really going from project to project and measuring the impact on a really detailed level of the large building blocks of our roadmap by adding the savings. And for that, we developed a set of calculation schemas that standardize this process of calculation.
All right. So, and with the last question answered, we are already at the end. In a few days, you will receive a link to rewatch this webcast. And thank you very much, Tobias Harland, for this insightful views on how to lead digital transformation initiatives out of the crisis. And of course, thank you everyone for your participation. We hope you enjoyed our today's webcast. And if you have further questions, please do not hesitate to send us an email. So see you at the next webcast session and have a good day.